My daughter called me from her fiancé's parents' lake's house on a Thursday afternoon in September, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, and told me I wasn't welcome at the dinner. She'd asked me to pay $12,000. I want you to sit with that for a second. Because I did. I sat with it at my kitchen table in Sudbury with my reading glasses still on and a cup of tea going cold in front of me, and I read her text twice before I called her back. And when I did call, she didn't answer. She sent another text instead. Mom, Heather and Gerald feel it would be more comfortable if the hosting was left to them this year. You're still invited. Just maybe don't come until after the appetizers. After the appetizers. At the dinner, I was paying $12,000 to cater. I set my phone face down on the table. I looked at my hands. The left one still has a faint scar along the thumb from a box cutter I caught wrong at the shop in 1987. The right one has knuckles that ache in February from 38 winters of hauling stock, doing inventory, opening early, locking up late. These are the hands that built Kowalski Home and Garden, the shop my mother started with a folding table at the Sudbury Farmers Market in 1971, and that I turned into the largest independent garden and home supply store in Northern Ontario. 2 locations, 14 full-time staff, a loyal list that I know by first name. People in this town know my hands. They shake them when they come in to buy seed packets in May. They squeeze them when I ask about their kids. They are not the hands of someone who sits after the appetizers. Here is what I want to tell you before I tell you the rest. My daughter is not a bad person. I need you to know that now, the way you need to know the weather before you go out, not to excuse it, just to understand what you're walking into. She's 34 years old, and she has wanted her whole life to belong somewhere softer than where she came from. I understand that wanting. I grew up in a house where we counted the hydro bill to the dollar every month. Wanting soft things when you come from hard ones is not a character flaw. It's human. It's just that wanting them badly enough can make you do things that are. Her fiancé's name is Marcus. He's a pleasant enough man, quiet, well-dressed, works in finance in Toronto, comes from a family that summers on a private lake in Muskoka and winters in Arizona, and refers to both of those things as simply what one does. His mother, Heather, is the kind of woman who offers you a glass of wine with a smile that tells you she'd prefer you didn't accept. His father, Gerald, coached youth hockey for 20 years, not because he loved children, but because he loved being thanked. My daughter met Marcus at a work conference 3 years ago and fell in love with him and with the whole world around him at the same time. I watched it happen. The Sunday calls got a little more careful. She stopped saying things like, "It's freezing in my apartment," and started saying, "The condo runs a bit cool." She stopped laughing at the kind of jokes we'd always laughed at. Dry, a little sharp, Northern Ontario jokes, the kind you make when winter is 6 months long and you'd rather laugh than cry. She started laughing at different jokes, quieter ones, polished ones. I let it go because that is what mothers do. We watch our children sand down their rough edges to fit into new rooms, and we keep our mouths shut, and we love them through it. The engagement was announced at Easter. I was happy. Genuinely. I cried the good kind. I met Heather and Gerald that same weekend at a dinner in Toronto that Marcus arranged, and I wore my good blazer, and I brought a bottle of Ontario Pinot Noir, and I was determined to be exactly who I was, and let that be enough. Heather shook my hand and said, "Oh, you run a shop." The way she said shop made it sound like something that belonged in a different century. How lovely for the community! Gerald asked if I'd been to Muskoka, and when I said not recently, he nodded the way you nod at a child who's just said something geographically incorrect. I drove home from that dinner on the 400 North, and I told myself it didn't matter. These were not my people, and I didn't need them to be. My daughter loved their son. That was the thing that mattered. And then the Thanksgiving dinner happened, or rather, the planning of it. My daughter had come to me in July. She and Marcus had announced they wanted to have both families together for Thanksgiving. A big dinner, a chance to bond before the wedding in June. It was her idea, she told me, and she was so lit up about it that I said yes before she finished the sentence. She wanted to host it at Gerald and Heather's property near Bracebridge. It would be their space, but my contribution. I said I'd cover the catering. I called a company in Bracebridge I know through a supplier connection. Good people, real food, the kind of Thanksgiving that feels like somebody's grandmother made it. The quote came in at $11,800 for 30 guests. I said yes. I sent the deposit from my business account. I signed the catering agreement myself. I want you to notice that detail. I signed it myself. My name, my account, my contract. That is not an accident. 38 years of running a business has taught me that the only promise that survives a disagreement is the one with your signature on it. I didn't think I'd need that lesson here. I signed it anyway, the way I always sign everything, carefully, with my reading glasses on, after reading every line. Over the summer, the dinner grew. Gerald had colleagues he wanted to include. Heather had her book club friends, her tennis partners, her neighbor whose husband sat on some board somewhere. The guest list went from 30 to 42. The seating chart that my daughter texted me a photo of in late August had a head table. She called it the family table, with Gerald and Heather and Marcus and my daughter, and a set of Marcus's aunts and cousins I'd never met. I was at a different table. Table 3, near the kitchen pass-through. I called my daughter about it the same evening, calmly. I have raised a daughter mostly alone. Her father and I separated when she was 9, and he moved to Calgary and became gradually theoretical, and I have never once raised my voice at her in a way I wasn't immediately ashamed of. I called her calmly. "Sweetheart," I said, "I just saw the seating photo. I think there might have been a mix-up. I've got myself at table 3. There was a pause. The pause told me everything before she said a word. Mom. Her voice was careful in a way it hadn't been since she was a teenager being caught in something. So the thing is, the family table is really just for Heather has some specific people she wants there, and it's her home, so. It's her home, I said, and it's your Thanksgiving dinner, and I'm your mother. I know, Mom, I know. But Heather feels like table 3 is actually a really nice spot, and honestly, you'll have a better time with fewer people to talk to. She said that? She mentioned that you might be more comfortable with. More comfortable, I repeated. Mom, please don't make this into a thing. I'm not making it into anything, I said. I'm asking my daughter where I'm sitting at a dinner I'm paying for. The silence that followed was not empty. It had a shape to it. The shape of a young woman who has been coached. Heather suggested, my daughter finally said carefully, that since you're contributing financially, maybe it makes more sense for you to be sort of behind the scenes. More of a supporting role. The hosting side of things is really their area of expertise, and behind the scenes. It's not meant the way it sounds, Mom. I want you to tell me how it's meant, I said. She couldn't. She went quiet in the way people go quiet when they've run out of someone else's words and haven't found their own yet. I told her I'd think about it. I hung up, and I sat at my kitchen table, and I looked at the catering contract I had printed and filed in the accordion folder keep for every business transaction I do, even personal ones. 38 years. I've been keeping that habit for 38 years. I called my friend Pam the next morning. Pam has worked with me for 19 years. She manages our lively location, tells me the truth without softening it, and has forgotten more about loyalty than most people ever learn. We had coffee in my office, and I told her about table 3, and the behind-the-scenes comment and the way my daughter's voice had sounded rehearsed. Pam set down her mug. You're paying $12,000 to be told to stay out of the way, she said. It's my daughter's dinner, I started. It's your check, Pam said. And your name on the contract, I assume? I told her yes. Then you're the customer, she said. And Beverley, she only calls me Beverley when she's about to say something I don't want to hear. You have got to stop letting people use your open hand as a reason to turn away your face. This has been going on since Marcus's family showed up. You've been stepping back every time they step forward, and they've noticed. People always notice when the one paying doesn't complain. I drove home that evening thinking about what she'd said. She was right. I knew she was right. I'd watched myself shrink over the past 8 months every time Heather had a preference about something. The florist for the wedding centerpieces, the rehearsal dinner venue, The way my daughter had stopped mentioning the shop in conversations when Heather was present. I'd told myself each time that it was love. That is what mothers do. We make room. But there's a difference between making room and being erased. And I hadn't let myself see which one was happening. Then my daughter sent the text on a Thursday in September, and I couldn't unsee it anymore. She hadn't written it herself. I know my daughter's voice in writing the way I know my own handwriting. The cadence was wrong. The phrasing was his. I'd heard it in conversations, that particular brand of soft hostility dressed up as consideration. My daughter had typed it and sent it, and I understand that she did it from fear, from wanting so badly to stay in that gleaming world that she was willing to temporarily borrow someone else's cruelty to do it. But she sent it, and I read it. And that is where the story turns. Mom, Heather and Gerald feel it would be more comfortable if the hosting was left to them this year. You're still invited. Just maybe don't come until after the appetizers. I read it, and I waited for the hurt to flatten me the way it had been flattening me quietly for months. But what came instead was different. Something clean and cool, the way the air changes the second before a northern Ontario storm arrives. That particular stillness that tells you the weather has made a decision. I looked at my accordion folder on the kitchen counter. I thought about what my name looked like on page 3 of the catering contract. The sole responsible party. I thought about what Pam had said. And I thought about my mother, who built a business from a folding table at a farmer's market, and who told me once that the only real power you have in any room is knowing exactly what you're willing to walk away from. I picked up my phone. I didn't text back right away. I am not a reactive person. 38 years of running a business has cured me of reaction. I opened the catering agreement and I read it on my phone screen with my reading glasses on, slowly, the way I read every contract. The cancellation clause was in Section 7. We were more than 60 days from the event. A full refund of the deposit was available if I initiated cancellation before the 30-day mark. The contract was in my name. Only my name. No one else could cancel it. No one else could change it. No one else could authorize a single appetizer. I set down the phone. I thought about table 3. I thought about behind the scenes. I thought about after the appetizers. And then I picked the phone back up and I replied to my daughter. I kept it to one sentence because one sentence was all it needed. If I'm not at the table, I'm not paying for the table. I sent it. And then, and this is the part that matters. The part I want you to hear clearly if you've ever been a person who makes a decision and then immediately starts unmating it. I did not wait. I did not pour a glass of wine and watch my phone for a response. I opened my contacts and I called the catering company. It was a Thursday at 4:30 in the afternoon. Donna, the woman I'd signed the contract with, answered on the second ring. I identified myself, I cited the contract number, and I told her I was initiating cancellation under Section 7 and would be following up with a written request by end of day. Donna, God bless her, was professional and efficient and had the confirmation email in my inbox before I'd finished making tea. I sent the formal cancellation notice at 5:12 p.m. My daughter called at 6:47. She'd been crying already. I could hear it in the first syllable. Mom. Just that one word and I already knew she'd found out that Donna had called the contact number on file, which was my daughter's cell, because she'd been the planning liaison, and told her the dinner order had been canceled by the account holder. Mom, what did you do? Not a question, a statement. The voice of someone who already knows. I did what I said I'd do, sweetheart, I told her. If I'm not at the table, I'm not paying for the table. You can't just. The dinner is in 6 weeks, Mom. We've already sent invitations. Heather has already. She stopped. Heather has told everyone she's hosting. She can host, I said. I've simply removed my financial contribution from that hosting. But the food contract was in my name, I said. I was the customer. The caterer worked for me. I exercised my right to cancel. That's all. There was a silence that was different from the earlier silences. Less rehearsed. More real. Why would you do this? She said. And now she was crying properly. The kind that comes from the chest. Why would you blow this up? I didn't blow anything up, I said quietly. I declined to fund my own disappearing act. That's a different thing. I could hear her breathing. You were going to seat me at table 3, I said. At a dinner I paid $12,000 to put on. You were going to tell me to arrive after the appetizers. Your fiancé's mother was going to stand at the head of the room and be thanked for hosting an event she didn't pay a cent toward. And when I asked to understand how that was the arrangement, you told me I should take a supporting role. That is what was happening, sweetheart. I needed you to see it plainly. Mom. I know you didn't write that text yourself, I said. I know your voice. But you sent it, and I need you to understand what you sent. A long quiet. Marcus's family is going to lose their minds, she said in a smaller voice now. They've been telling everyone. What they told everyone, I said, was that they were hosting a dinner that they did not have the resources to host. That's not my problem to solve. I didn't create that situation. I simply stopped covering it up. She didn't say anything. I want you to listen to me, I said, because I'm going to tell you something once, and then I'm going to let you sleep on it. I have worked since I was 22 years old. I took over your grandmother's market table with $60 in my pocket, and I have never once in 38 years asked anyone to do something I wasn't doing myself. I missed things. I know I missed things. I was at your school concerts in my work vest with mulch on my boots, and I know you saw other parents who came looking like they hadn't just finished loading a delivery. I'm sorry for what that cost you. I understand why you wanted something different. She was crying quietly. But I am your mother, I said. I am the person who drove you to swimming at 6 in the morning when your father was in Calgary being theoretical. I am the person who co-signed your first car loan and talked you through every hard thing you've ever had. I have never asked for a front row seat. I have never needed to be thanked publicly. What I am not able to do is write a $12,000 check and then be told to wait outside. Not because of my ego. Because of what it would teach you about your own value the day you're the one being asked to wait. The phone was quiet long enough that I checked to see if she'd hung up. She hadn't. I need to think, she said finally. Her voice sounded different. Younger and more like herself. Take all the time you need, I told her. I love you more than I'll ever be able to say. Call me when you're ready. Heather called the next morning at 8:55. I was already at the lively location helping with a floor reset, and I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was 5 minutes and 20 seconds long. I know because I clocked it. It began with concern and pivoted to outrage sometime around the 90-second mark. By the end, she was informing me that my behavior was an embarrassment, that I had humiliated her family in front of their community, and that surely a woman who ran a shop would understand that certain events require a certain kind of presentation, and perhaps I ought to reconsider my decision before I damaged my daughter's future irreparably. My daughter's future. I called Heather back from my van in the parking lot at noon. I want you to picture that. Me in a Kowalski Home and Garden fleece, a coffee from Tim Hortons in the cup holder, a copy of the catering cancellation confirmation on the passenger seat. Heather, I said when she answered, I got your message. Beverley, good. Now let's talk about what can be done to fix this before. There's nothing to fix, I said. A pause. I beg your pardon. I made a business decision, I said. The contract was mine. The deposit was mine. I canceled it within the allowable window. That's the whole story from a logistics standpoint. I understand it's created a gap for your event planning. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. The inconvenience, she repeated, and I could hear her working to keep her voice level. Heather, I said, I'm going to be honest with you because I think you deserve honesty, even when it isn't comfortable. You wanted my money, and you wanted me at table 3. I understand that arrangement made sense from where you were standing. It doesn't make sense from where I'm standing. You are being extraordinarily difficult, she said. I'm being clear, I said. Those aren't the same thing. Do you understand what Gerald and I have given your daughter? The connections, the introductions, the family name. I understand, I said, and I'll tell you what I've given my daughter. 25 years of early mornings. A business she'll inherit someday if she wants it. A work ethic and a sense of her own worth, though I'll admit we've been having some trouble with the second one lately. Heather went quiet. You can have a lovely Thanksgiving dinner, I said, I genuinely hope you do. I'll simply be having mine elsewhere, with the people who think my presence is worth arriving on time for. I ended the call, and I sat in my van, and I drank my Tim Hortons, and I watched two of my staff carry a display of fall mums out to the sidewalk, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 8 months. Level. Just level. The week that followed was an education for everyone involved, including my daughter. With the catering canceled, Heather and Gerald discovered something that I suspect they'd been working hard not to discover. A dinner for 42 people in Bracebridge in Thanksgiving week costs real money, and real money was a thing the Andersons. That is the family name. And I will tell you, it carries rather less financial weight than its bearers had led anyone to believe were running short on. The Muskoka property had a mortgage on it that Marcus had mentioned to my daughter once in an unguarded moment. Gerald's business, which he described vaguely as consulting, had not had a strong year. Heather's gracious lifestyle was maintained in part by a line of credit that had become a way of life. The grand dinner they'd been describing to their friends as their event, their hosting, their Thanksgiving, had only ever been possible because I was writing the check. Without me, there was no dinner. There was a property and an invitation list, and 42 people expecting a meal that no one in that family could afford to provide. My daughter found this out over several painful days of conversations with Marcus that she later told me she wished she could unhear. Not because of what they revealed about Heather and Gerald, but because of how Marcus responded to them. He didn't call me to apologize. He didn't tell his mother she had been wrong. He got quiet in the way that weak people get quiet. Not from thought, but from the wish that the problem would solve itself so he wouldn't have to. My daughter came to my house on a Sunday afternoon, 2 weeks after I canceled the catering. She didn't call first. She just knocked on my door, and when I opened it, she looked like someone who had been thinking very hard for a very long time and had arrived at something. I made tea, and we sat at the same table where I'd helped her with grade 8 math. She wrapped both hands around her mug and she didn't say anything for a while, and I let her not say anything. I'm good at that. I've had a lot of practice. Finally, she said, I've been calling you the shop owner to Heather's friends. I didn't say anything. I said it like it was something smaller than it is, she said, like it was something to work around, and I let Heather do the same thing, and I never once corrected her. Not when she said your shop to her friends like it was a hobby, not when she introduced you at dinner as Marcus's future mother-in-law who does retail. She looked up. I heard myself do it. I knew every time. I know you knew, I said. How did you not hate me, she said, at the table 3 text. How did you stay calm? Because you're my daughter, I said, and because I knew that version of you wasn't the whole story. She put her face in her hands. She cried in the way she only cries when there's no audience, the way she cried when she was small and really frightened. I watched Marcus not say a single word in my defense all week. She said, his mother said things about you. She said, you're the reason people like us have to work so hard to maintain standards. She actually said that, people like us. And Marcus was sitting right there. I know, I said quietly. That's what I've been doing, she said. Sitting right there. For 8 months, I've been sitting right there while she did it, and I told myself I wasn't responsible for what other people said. She shook her head. I sent you that text, Mom. I sent my own mother a text telling her to show up after the food was served to an event she was paying for. You were scared, I said. I was a coward, she said. That's different. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers, the rough hand with the box cutter scar that's been there since 1987. Can I tell you something? I said. She nodded. Your grandmother had a saying. She picked it up from her own mother, and I've always kept it. She said the money's not the point, Bev. The money's just the evidence. What someone does with your generosity tells you who they actually are, not who they'd like you to think they are. Who they are. My daughter was very still. I offered that dinner gladly, I said, not to buy a seat or earn a thank you, because it was my daughter's family, and I wanted to give something. That's the only reason. The moment they decided to use that gift to rank me out of the room, it stopped being a gift. It became a transaction, and in any transaction, I know exactly where I stand. She squeezed my hand. I'm giving Marcus back the ring, she said. I looked at her. Not because of you, she said quickly. Because of him. Because I spent a week waiting for him to say something. And he never did. Not one thing. And I kept thinking, this is what I almost became. This exact person. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life with someone who becomes that person every time something is hard. I didn't try to talk her out of it. A mother who has learned when to act has also learned when to be still. I just kept my hand over hers. Heather came to my store 3 weeks after that. Not to my house, to my store. I think she chose the location deliberately, the way people choose public spaces when they want a performance to have witnesses. She came in on a Tuesday morning in her good coat, and she found me at the main counter doing a supplier call, and she waited until I was off the phone, and then she said she thought we should clear the air. We're in my store, I said. Clear away. She told me I had overreacted, that the seating had been a misunderstanding, that she had always had the greatest respect for women who worked hard and built things, and she hoped I understood that nothing had been intended unkindly. I looked at her across my counter. Behind her, through the front window, I could see the sign my mother had designed in 1978, the one we'd kept, because it suited the store. I could see 2 of my staff loading a customer's car with bagged mulch. I could see November in Northern Ontario doing what it always does, gray and honest and unglamorous and real. Heather, I said, you are a person who is very good at saying things that sound like apologies without containing any. I've met people like you before, and I'll tell you what I tell them. The only currency I deal in is the plain kind. If something was intended kindly, it lands kindly. That's the whole measure. She opened her mouth. My daughter is not getting married to your son, I said. I think you probably know that. And I want you to hear this one thing clearly before you go. Because I think you came here expecting me to be smaller than I am, and I want to save you the trouble of expecting that again. I didn't pull my money from that dinner because I needed to sit at a particular table. I pulled it because my daughter was watching. Because the lesson she was learning in that family was that her mother's value was in her check and not in her chair. I couldn't let her learn that. The $12,000 was the tuition. Heather looked at me for a moment. Something moved across her face that was too complicated to name. Then she said, your store is very nice, and she left. It is a very nice store. My mother built the bones of it. I built the rest. There's a practical ending to all of this, and then there's the real ending, and I'll give you both. The practical one. The Thanksgiving dinner happened in a scaled-back version at Heather and Gerald's property. About 15 people, from what I understand. Gerald apparently made chili. The Anderson finances became a subject my daughter and I have spoken about with some compassion. Because people who spend 30 years pretending to have more than they do are usually frightened people, and frightened people do unkind things for understandable reasons, even if the understandable reasons don't excuse them. Marcus called my daughter twice. She took the first call and told him she didn't think the relationship was right for either of them and that she wished him well. She didn't take the second call. That's the kind of clarity that takes courage, and I watched her find it. And it was the most expensive and most worthwhile thing I've watched her do. I had Thanksgiving at my sister Joanne's house in Chelmsford with 16 people, 2 dogs, and enough perogies to feed a work crew. I brought a butter tart square from the bakery on Lorne Street, and I sat at the kitchen table. Not the head of it, just at it. And I was surrounded by people who have known my hands for 40 years and have never once needed them explained. The real ending is what my daughter did in December. She came into the store on a Saturday, which she started doing more of after the autumn, helping with the holiday display and the social media posts, which she's better at than anyone I've hired. She brought her camera and spent an afternoon taking photos for the store's Instagram. She photographed the counter where my mother used to write up sales orders in a green ledger book. She photographed the row of seed packets we still carry in the same wire rack we've had since 1989. She photographed the order board in the back office where I write the week's delivery schedule by hand every Monday morning. And she photographed my I was pricing bulb orders at the counter, and I didn't notice her doing it until I saw the flash. She held up the camera to show me the shot, the scar, the knuckles. The pen I hold at an angle because of an old cramp from too many years of inventory in the cold. She posted it that night with a caption that she read to me over the phone. It said, "These hands built something from nothing." I forgot that for a while. I won't forget again. It got 412 likes by morning, mostly from people in this town who have shaken those hands at my counter for decades. There's a woman in Sudbury who started a business at a farmer's market table with $60 and a talent for showing up. Her daughter knows who she is now. The rest of it is just Thanksgiving dinner. It comes around again every year, and next year I'll be at the table I'm always at, the one with the people who wanted me there from the start.